I am very pleased to have with us on the program right now from the National Post in Canada, Mr. Lorne Gunner is with us. And Lorne, thank you so much for coming on the program tonight, sir.
You're welcome, Cam.
You know, we've been following with some interest the case of Ian Thompson, a man in Canada who defended himself in his home from four individuals who were attempting to firebomb it. And yet Mr. Thompson is currently on trial right now for defending his home. In particular, I guess, the alleged unsafe storage of his firearms. What the law requires that his guns were locked up in a safe somewhere, right?
Well, he had handguns, which in Canada we consider restricted firearms. And so you have to have a special permit to have a handgun. And then there are special storage rules that go with them. And one of them is you have to have your gun locked and then put in a safe. So you have to have a trigger lock, and then you have to have the gun in a safe. And then on top of that, you have to have the ammunition. The general interpretation of law enforcement is that you then have to have the ammunition locked away separately so that you can't get at it very quickly. And so the Crown prosecutors here, the equivalent of, say, U.S. attorneys, decided that they had to, because he had so quickly gotten to his handguns after the firebombing of his home started and loaded them and made 3 warning shots, because of all of that happened so quickly that he couldn't possibly have had them properly stored, so he must have had them already loaded and in his nightstand, which would be illegal.
So just based on how quickly he was able to respond, they said, well, he must not have had him in a safe?
That's right. That's basically what the theory is. And there was a big mistake yesterday made by the government lawyers, because he said, Mr. Thompson, the spent casings for your 38 were found on your nightstand. So you must have picked them up from your veranda because you were shooting outside. You must have picked them up from the veranda after you'd made your shots and brought them back to the bedroom. And Thompson said, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
He said, well, of course, they fell out of the gun after they were fired, didn't they? And everyone who was in the courtroom, most of whom are gun enthusiasts and supporters of Thompson, laughed because, of course, they don't come out until you take them out.
With a revolver, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. So this Crown prosecutor, this U.S. attorney, essentially, was so unfamiliar with firearms that he made this mistake that Thompson had obviously picked up the casings because they would have, been ejected from the gun as he was shooting it. So it was quite a blow to the credibility of the government's case, of course.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like it. And in fact, didn't the judge actually call a halt to proceedings? I read a story that the judge himself was confused about Canada's gun laws, and
everybody is. And there have been several cases since we got our most recent firearms legislation in 1995 about unsafe storage. And I maintain that the provisions of the law about unsafe storage were so broadly and unclearly written that the Crown and police can use them as a catch-all. If they find you with firearms and they want, for some reason, to prosecute you, they can use these unsafe storage laws because it pretty much covers anything. We've had cases where the Crown has tried to make unsafe storage charges stick for people who had taken their firearms out of storage to clean and repair them. And they were found dismantled on a kitchen table. But they weren't locked up, so therefore they must be unsafely stored. I mean, that's how preposterous it's become in the last 17 years here with this new firearms law. It was designed. The new law was designed by people who don't believe civilians should own firearms, and so almost everything in it is designed as a hurdle to discourage people from wanting to own firearms. I mean, they didn't want to go as far as confiscation, but they certainly did want to make it as unpleasant as possible, as onerous as possible to own firearms so that fewer people would do it.
When stories like this come up, obviously in Canada right now, I know that the demise of the Long Gun Registry is also something that is making headlines. Does this, Lorne, does it raise awareness among non-gun owners in Canada of just how absurd the situation is?
It does, and you know what? I am sometimes surprised, and probably shouldn't be, by how much people are surprised by this. You know, I've followed this since before the law was passed, back when it was in its drafting stages, and so it doesn't come as a surprise to me. But and I've written about it, you know, how many dozens or even hundreds of times, and yet when something like this comes up, it brings it home for a lot of people because they can see themselves in Ian Thompson's place. I mean, here he is, he has a place outside of a small community. He's out in a rural area. Three guys in mass come on behalf of a fourth person with a neighbor he's been having a dispute with over land, and they start throwing Molotov cocktails at his small home, and people can understand what that would be like, how frightening it would be, and they cheer for him that he had the ability to go and he's a former firearms instructor for police and armed forces, and so he loaded quickly, he went out, fired 3 warning shots at them, scared them off. And then one of the other reasons that the police wanted to charge him with unsafe storage is he kept the pistol that he shot the warning shots with. He tucked it into the waistband of his pajamas. This was in a pre-dawn attack on his home. And while he was dousing the fires that they had started on the siding of his house with a garden hose, he had this pistol tucked in his pajamas, mostly because he didn't want to take the time to go put it away. He wanted to fight the fires, but also because he said he wasn't sure these guys might come back. And so he wanted to be ready if they did. And so the police said, well, it's unsafe storage because it's only in the waistband of your pajamas.
You know, I have to say, I mean, I know that there are some states in the United States where the storage laws are as ridiculous. Massachusetts is really bad. New Jersey is pretty bad. There's some other states as well. But, you know, do you think, Lorne, that these laws have had the effect that the anti-gun politicians have wanted? Have Canadians decided, you know what, it's just not worth it to try to go through? Yeah,
there are an awful lot who have, but there are also an awful lot of people who just have ignored it because in some ways it seems unreal to them. There are lots of estimates. So the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the RCMP, brought out their report about 3 weeks ago, I guess, on their annual firearms report because they're in charge of the laws, and they claimed that there'd been a pretty big jump in the number of guns owned in Canada, from about 7.5 million to almost 8 million. But there'd been a decline in the number of registered owners. And all the people in the gun community laughed at that because, first of all, the estimate that there's only 8 million guns in the country is based on sort of self-reporting. It's kind of like a phone-in poll, right? You have to actually register your gun for you to get into the RCMP statistics. But if you look at import records and manufacturing records and all sorts of other academic research, it's probably closer to 14 million. So the RCMP probably only know about half of the guns in the country. And there are millions of people who've never bothered to register because for some reason it's just never sunk into them that that's the law.
Right. Well, I'm curious what's going to happen to Mr. Thompson. Do we know when a jury, or is this a jury trial?
No, he opted for a judge alone, and I'm not quite sure why that is, but he has probably Canada's most experienced gun lawyer as his attorney, and so I'm sure that the guy's name's Ed Burlew. I'm sure that Mr. Burlew decided that was the best chance to argue the legal technicalities and get the judge to decide. So they're back in court on May the 2nd, and both sides are then to bring with them the precedents they think that are relevant to the storage laws. But I'm fairly confident that the judge is going to do what most judges have done with this law in the past, and that is declare it so unfathomable that you can't enforce it.
Well, Lorne, again, I appreciate you coming on the program tonight, sir, and I hope that we can have you back on whenever we figure out what's going to happen with Mr. Ian Thompson.
I'd like to be able to figure it out, too.
All right. Thank you so much, Lorne. Have a great night.